Welcome to the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast, your place for truckside chats and insights into the retriever game. Whether you're just getting started or you're a seasoned handler, this podcast is another resource for tips, tricks, and insights from both the amateurs and professional trainers' perspectives. Each week, we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of retriever training, sharing stories of success, overcoming challenges, and forging stronger bonds with our dogs. This is the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast. I'm Chris Rud, your host, fellow retriever enthusiast, and student of the game. Let's dive in. All right, welcome to episode 4 of the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast. I'm joined again today by the presence of Clark Kennington. Welcome, Clark.
What's going on, Chris?
Yeah, well, it's actually only the second day after we recorded episode 1, but we're releasing it after, we talked to some other fine retriever gentlemen, but you had a pretty long day.
I'm exhausted. Chris was asking, what are we going to do on this podcast? And I said, let's theme it on how exhausted you are after running 15 master dogs and a 60-dog master test.
That's quite a few.
Yeah, it's tiring.
Well, you did good, though.
Yeah, I did good. I passed 14 out of 15. I had a golden moment in the third series, and just didn't work out. So.
What did you say earlier? He took Claritin. What did you say?
Oh, Preston said that I forgot to give him his Claritin because he's allergic to water. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. He ran down the water's edge. He's like, yep, that's water down there.
And he said, nope, not getting in.
Not getting in it.
Yeah, that's not a good feeling when you're standing there like.
No. And then the next mark, all he had to do was pick up 2 clean. I got him to punch across the water. He smelled the bird, and he ran over there and goes, yep, that's a bird. Went the other way. Went and found the bird at the blind stake. Yeah, special moments.
Yeah, dogs will be dogs, right?
That's right. Always.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited. Today we're going to be talking about a few different things. One of them, I had a request from another fellow trainer, and he wanted to know kind of when you started working on selection and what's the workflow that you kind of go through, or not the workflow, but the training protocols that you go through to teach them selection.
I don't really do a whole lot working on teaching selection, to be honest with you. I feel like that it's something that naturally comes to them as you start working on, especially when you start doing poison birds and things like that, because you are pulling off of somewhere they want to go as it is. Where do I actually start utilizing it? I would say when I start throwing multiple marks to where, especially like indented triples, or certain situations where I want to get the short bird second, even if it's not necessarily an indented triple. That's when I'll start working on it. But as far as drills and stuff, I don't do a whole lot of, per se, really work on that particularly. What I've noticed through the years is as long as you're consistent with what you're doing, especially when you start introducing poison birds, that it will kind of indirectly fall into place. The series that we ran today was a prime example of that in the third series. They threw the first bird out was a shorter bridge bird across a piece of water. Then they had a long bird to the right all the way across the pond. And then the last bird thrown was a mom and pop out of the same station that the bridge bird came out of. So really you wanted to pick up that bridge bird second. It was much shorter than the long right bird. So you were less likely to double handle unless you're a golden.
I can't be bashing Goldens on this podcast, bro.
Well, I had some other Goldens do really well.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just this Golden. So that was a scenario where you really wanted to select the short bird there of that mom and pop second, because dogs naturally don't want to go long than short. They're just not wired that way. And plus there was a holding blind standing out there. The blind planter came out of directly behind that short bird. So if you went long over here, they're going to come back and go, oh yeah, I'm going out there again. And they're very likely to just roll over that point and keep going. Thankfully the wind was kind of helping that situation. If they did see that holding blind, they should have winded that bird. But yeah, I don't really do a whole lot of things to per se work on that. If I do see it becoming an issue, then I will make a point to work on it. But it's not a common thing that I see once going through the.
How would you work on it? Like, what is it? Do you just primarily recall? Are you handling? Like, what's your kind of flow through that?
It depends on the situation. A lot of the times, if I'm trying to select a certain bird, and that dog just defies it. Hey, I'm not going there. I want to go over here. A lot of the times, I'll just do a recall, tweet no here, no pressure. I'm blessed to have bird boys in the field. I'll have the bird boy just give me a hey, hey. And may not throw anything, just a hey, hey. That's where we're going. Send. Or I made bird boy just do a fake throw with no noise to work on. That's where I want you to go. But I'm not going to rethrow it. And then I may repeat that same process somewhere else, not in the same exact situation. Because once they've done it there, you're not going to get anything else out of it in that situation. Move somewhere else. Kind of repeat the same scenario, but in a different area. But that's the way I typically like to work on it. I'm not a big advocate on if I'm trying to send them here and they go over there, I'm going to handle them back over here. Well, the decision was right here. It wasn't over here. So
Yeah,
I don't
the
want
decision was made when they left the line.
when they left. Exactly. So I want to do what I need to do to make that decision process from the get-go what it needs to be. And if that involves a little gunner help, that's what I'm going to do. And that's all a communication thing. All selection is communication. And that's one of the things you'll always hear me harp on. You know, our ability to communicate with the dogs can be the difference in success or failure. Always. So we have to really make sure we're doing what's best for the dog in those situations to make sure we're communicating clearly what we want and helping them succeed when we are communicating with them.
Yeah, and I think just to reinforce what you're saying is, like, when you start training that young dog, and it's amazing how many cues you can build in that will mean something later on in life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the other question I had is, do you think it's important to work on, a poison bird? I mean, like, you run a lot of poison birds because of the SRS. I mean, if you've ever watched any SRS trial, there's at least one, probably two, maybe three poison birds that's going to be in the set. But do you think it's important before you run finished or rerun a master that you've practiced poison birds?
In master, yes, I do, because there's a possibility you can see it in master test.
I've seen two in finished test.
Yeah, and you can see it
diversion,
in finished. Typically on a diversion bird, yes. There's arguments in finished. If you actually throw a mark and run a blind, is that mark still a portion of your marking test? There's debate on that. Some people say it's now a portion of your control test. That mark shouldn't be judged as a mark. But I promise you, in a master test, that is a mark. I believe you should work on it. But before you ever work on it, you better have taught it. And that's very crucial. You can't just walk up there and say, I want to run a poison bird blind today. Well, when you say leave it, dead bird, or however you communicate it, you might as well be speaking Chinese to a dog that understands English because you never taught it how to do it. So before you ever work on it, make sure you've taught it that communication, that language to the dog. I utilize it a lot when I'm getting ready for the grant. I do a lot of poison bird stuff. And now a lot of the times I'm setting up a particular mark with it. A lot of times it's a check down bird. Now I'll throw a short bird and run 2 or 3 really big blinds and then come back and say, all right, easy. I want you to check down and get this bird. And I may have a holding blind that's exposed way out there that they're come back and they're looking right over that bird, seeing it. And I want them to check down and get this bird. So I'll utilize it a lot for that. It's not just about, can you run past a bird?
Yeah.
It's a very valuable tool in my opinion.
I tend to use a lot of poison birds because it makes my setup as an amateur a lot easier because I can work on memory and I can work on, the cues like you talked about, but I can maybe only have to set up one winger as a backup winger, throw the mark remotely and walk back, run the poison bird. And now I've just built in a lot of memory, or I'm forcing the dog to really remember where that bird is by doing all these other distractions. And I don't have to do as much equipment and it becomes a more quality lesson without any head swinging. Because I think that's the big thing that's an advantage of running poison birds is you're not teaching that dog, okay, you're throwing a ton of multiples, but you're getting the same effect that you can from a multiple.
Yeah. One of the gentlemen that I first started in this game with, that was the discussion we used to have a lot. And that's how he'd work on most of his memory stuff. He didn't throw very many multiples at all, but he'd throw a mark and run 2 or 3 blinds and come back and get that mark.
Yeah.
And that was his way of working on memory. And he's very successful. He's got a lot of plates, a lot of grand champions. He's been very successful through his career. I do that a lot. Throw a mark, run a blind or 2, go back, get the mark. Just to work on it. As far as throwing multiples, in my opinion, when you're throwing multiples, you're working more on mechanics than anything. Not necessarily the memory of things. If I'm going to throw a multiple, a lot of the times it's going to be to work on the mechanics of a specific multiple. Maybe it's an indented triple. Indented triple is all about communication and mechanics. That's what it is. Can you primary select or secondary select, whatever you want to do on the short bird? Can you get that short bird second after going long? That's the whole thing in it. Because most dogs are not going to be successful going outside long, and then checking down in the middle. Especially if they retire that middle bird or hide the gun really good, then you're in a lot of trouble.
Why do dogs want to pick up outside middle?
I really couldn't give you that answer.
I've been trying to figure one out.
That's just in their nature. That's like today. So many dogs, I'd see them, they go get that last bird down and they come back and be like, I'm going over here. No, you're not going over there. We're going to get this little short one. Maybe that's where I screwed up with that dog. Maybe I should just let him go get the right one second.
Yeah.
Because all I had to do was get 2 clean.
This brings up a good point. Like, when you're running a dog, like, say, early finished, maybe, well, it wouldn't happen in season because it's a double. Look, so let's just say early finished, probably not a master test yet because selection would come into play a lot. Do you ever let the dog choose which mark they're going to pick up, or do you always choose the bird?
Most of the time, I'm going to try to influence the decision where I'm positioned. But if a young dog comes in and says, I want that one, I'm not fighting a puppy over it.
Yeah.
I'm not, If that's what you want, I'm going to let you go get it because I don't have enough control instilled in that dog and trust within me to say, no, don't go get that one, go get this one. So what happens if I pull it off to go over here and it wants to go there and I send it and it goes, I'm going there anyway, and it gets lost en route. Now I'm going to end up double handling. So I'm not going to fight that battle with a younger dog at all. And another thing I'll do, and I really should have done this in this instance today. That dog wanted the outside mark. Should just let him go get it. He had already done 2 series clean. All I needed to do was get 2 clean and handle on the third.
Yeah.
So if he went and got that clean,
yeah,
and he went down there and looked at the water at the bridge bird, I just back. Who cares?
Yeah.
Yeah. But hindsight's 20/20. You always learn. You're always learning. But yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna force the issue on a younger dog.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think a lot of natural selection happens by doing things harder than the dog is. Maybe not the dog is ready for, but then the level that you're trying to run.
Yeah, and this brings you saying that kind of jogged my memory about one of the things I preached in the seminar we did in Florida that's going to be available on the Hunt Test Guide here any day now. And one of the things I really preach is standards. What is your standard per dog? Well, you can't increase your standard unless the dog's level of understanding has increased. And that's a common mistake is people's dog's level may be here and they want a standard up here. Well, if the dog's understanding's here, are we fair to put a level of a standard here? No, we'll never reach this point. So if the dog's understanding's here, your standard's got to be there. Now, as its understanding increases, then your standard has to increase with it. You can't just start up way up high. You have to gradually work your way up. And I think that's a great thing to bring up with this situation. Can my standard of what I expect that dog to do to be that high with a young dog? Absolutely not, because this level of understanding isn't high enough to be there.
That's good. So you wanted to talk a little bit about testing versus training. Mm-hmm. And I think that obviously that's really, really important. What do you think the ratio of testing versus training needs to be in your training setups? Obviously, we're not talking about actually going to, or did you mean how many tests should I run versus training, or did you mean like, what did you mean? Maybe I should just shut up and let you talk.
I see so many people when they're training, they're more testing than training. You know, they're setting up this mark to say, can my dog do it? And when they don't do it, there's corrections involved and feelings get involved. When in reality, if you're setting up that really difficult mark, it shouldn't be, can I see if my dog can do it? Is how am I going to help my dog understand how to do this? That's teaching. It's not testing. And that's the big thing I want to drive home. You know, when you're training, you're teaching. Every day is a teaching opportunity. A test is a test. Keep them separate. We're not testing when we're training. Our goal is when we're training is to make this dog a little better every day. Mm-hmm. So if we're testing every day, and that's all that dog knows, and every time it makes a mistake, it's getting in trouble because it didn't do the test correctly, are we ever going to get any further along? No, we're not. We're probably going to go backwards rather than forwards. And you have to go and enter with that mindset when you're training. You know, you set up certain marks, and what are you looking to get out of these marks? Okay, if the dog doesn't meet that expectation or that standard, depending on where that dog's level of understanding is, how are you going to treat it? Are you going to treat it as a teaching opportunity or a punishment opportunity? I lean more toward the teaching. Now, if it's a really older dog and I know that dog is just being defiant and saying, you know what, I know what I should be doing, there might be some corrections involved with it. But never so much that it's going to make them nervous about that situation. Give you an example of teaching versus training. Cut the corner marks, down the shores, on the point, off the points. How often do you see a dog when they show a down the shore blind or mark, that joker goes, instead of the shore being here, instead of going down the side, they go, woo, way out here, and they end up getting lost. Why is that? There's been way too much testing rather than training the dog how to do it right. They just let them get on the bank and get onto them real hard.
Yeah.
And then they go, okay, I don't want to be anywhere near that bank, so now I'm just going to go way out here. They're not focused on where the bird is or how to get there. They're just focused on staying away from that bank that's hot. Same thing on cut the corner. They see a cut the corner and like, that's a bad place to be. I don't want any part of that. So I'm either going to run way on land or way in water because they were never taught. It was all testing and corrections rather than teaching them how to do it. On the point, off point, blind. How often do you see dogs that don't want to cast toward a point? It happens.
Yeah, happened to you almost today.
Yeah, I had a couple of them today that were a little nervous about it. So you have to really be careful about that. And that point can't be hot all the time. It can't. You got to teach them. Teach them it's not a sin to be there. It's a sin not to come off of it if I tell you to.
Yeah.
So
I often see, I think the most apparent time that you see people training versus or testing versus training is when they're running a blind. Mm-hmm. And it could be a blind that has very little factors, and they either try to line the blind, which I'm not saying you should try to line a blind, but they never let the dog get offline like significantly, because at a hunt test, what are you going to have happen? Your dog's going to cave to some factor, mm-hmm. and then you're going to have to cast out of it, and you better make sure that you can get more angle than you actually need.
Yeah, and this is a good point to bring up, blinds in particular, training versus testing.
Yeah.
So many times we want to make all the decisions for the dog in a blind. In reality, we shouldn't be. The dogs that are really good blind runners are the ones that can kind of have that Rolodex in their mind, and they know what decisions to make when they see certain things. That's the good blind running dogs. How do they learn how to do that? If we're making the decision for them every single time, they're not learning that. Like today's blind, give you an example. We had to go down a hill, cross a little channel, over a point. When you got back in the water, it was a very clear picture of going past a point. I mean, it was pretty obvious. And you could see the dogs that saw it and knew what it was. And they come over that point and they'd be like, okay, I know what we're doing. So how do we get them to do that? You got to allow them to make decisions. So if I'm running that blind training, and that dog goes off that second point and goes wide into the water fat, so many people, the next thing they're going to do is they're going to start casting them back into the bank training. No, that dog made a wrong decision to go out to sea, call it back, and then cast it and get it to make the right decision.
Have it make the right decision
From
leaving the land.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Because if we let it go out to sea and then we start casting back in, did it learn anything? No, it didn't learn anything. Call it back to that point. No, here. No, here. No pressure. Cast it toward that point out there. Now, this is a misconception sometimes. People think that, oh, I got to get exactly what I want each time. A recall is a form of mental pressure. It is not a physical pressure, but it is a form of mental pressure. That no here is a correction to that dog. So if we call it back on that point and we give it that straight right cast to go to the point and it goes a little further right than what we want, guess what? We got to live with that. We're going to start chipping away at that blind from there at this point. Why? What's your thought on that, Chris?
I don't know.
Anytime we give a dog a physical or mental correction, what are we looking for it to do? Something different than what it did before. Did the dog do something different than what it did before? Absolutely. They don't rationalize, I went here and I got recalled. And I went here and I got recalled. So I need to go down the middle. That's not how they work. You may recall that dog and then you cast it and it just sits there and looks at you. It's like, well, I went that way and it was wrong, and I went that way and it was wrong. Now I don't know what the hell to do.
Yeah.
So you got to live with that, and it'll gradually get better. But don't just continue to let a dog go offline on something that they need to be painting a picture to understand.
Yeah,
recall them to that point and let them make the decision again.
I think one thing that Dan always keeps telling me, and it's true to this point, is that if you let a dog carry a line, they think a lot of times that's the right thing. That's the reward.
Right. Absolutely. So don't be afraid to recall some. You don't need to be given pressure for that. The dog was going out to sea. It's not a bad dog. We want them to be sinking more water. So we're not going to put any collar pressure on that. We're just going to use a mental recall and start casting. When you're running blinds in training, it's very different than at a test. When I'm running blinds in training, I want to see those dogs making those decisions. Mm-hmm. So they may be dead on line, and it becomes to a certain situation where there's a factor involved, and there's a right answer and a wrong answer. I'm going to let them commit one way or the other to the right or the wrong. If they commit to the wrong, it's not a sin. Tweet, no here, call them back in, get the cast to get the decision to the right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, when I'm running a test and I'm running a blind, I'm going to be more actively involved in what the decision-making is. So let's just say the right decision is to the right and the wrong decision is to the left. If I'm running a test, I'm watching that dog. If I see that dog's left shoulder start to drop at that decision-making point, I'm immediately getting involved. But if I'm training and I see that left shoulder drop, I'm like, okay, go ahead and commit to it. Tweet, no here. No collar pressure. No here. And then cast and get the correct decision. Now, if they go the wrong way again, then we're justified to give them a little pressure for it. We just told them not to go there. But if we're going immediately to pressure, that's when we'll start getting dogs that are a little buggy and having bad blind running attitudes, because when we're trying to teach them to make the right decisions, a lot of times they're going to make the wrong more than the right as we're starting. So if every time we're giving pressure, they're doing a lot of wrong things and they're running blinds, they're going to look out there and go, crap, here we go again. I'm going to get in trouble for something. So and that goes back to our first podcast about mental stability. It's crucial. So if we're giving corrections all the time, that dog's not going to be very mentally stable. When you say dead bird or dead or however you cue, in their mind, they're going, oh, crap, here we go again.
Yeah.
When in reality, we want them going, oh, yeah, here we go. Where are we going to go?
Yeah.
We want them to go.
Well, moving on, not moving on, but like kind of combining what you're talking about. A lot of times people don't realize that in UKC and in an SRS, it is not a sin to recall. Mm-hmm. And and just to be clear, in an AKC, either field trial or a master test, you can't recall on a blind unless you're trying to get the dog to see you, from what I understand. Is that correct? Pretty much?
Well, I mean, it's frowned upon.
Yeah.
Now, in a field trial,
Yeah.
you might as well just go ahead and call them all the way back in.
But my point is that if you work on recalls in training and they understand what that means, you can get yourself out of a lot of trouble, especially in the grand, because you can recall a dog pretty significantly and not have an issue at the grand, because they say when they do the handlers meeting, they're like, cast is towards the bird, towards the line, or back towards you.
Correct. And
there's been 2 times in the grand that it has saved my butt. And one of them was this last year. We had a really, it was one of those blinds that you looked at and you said, man, I don't run things like that. When you see those, you're like, oh man, that's not crystal clear what I'm asking the dog to do. And what it wasn't that complicated, but it was one of those hard to finish blinds. And what it was just swim across the pond, slightly angled, but it had this little tiny cove that was probably 7 yards wide by 10 yards deep, and the blind was at the end of that channel. But it was all a bunch of grass around it, and it was dark, and just dogs didn't want to go there. It was a very tiny end channel blind, and I had a great line with Winter. She probably took 2 casts to get to that point, but she was convinced that the bird was just to the left of that channel. And I gave her a cast. She never gave me a cast refusal, but she gave me not enough angle to get into the channel. And she got on that point, and I read the dog. And I was like, this dog is fixing to go left, and she needs to go right.
Yep.
And I called her in about just enough to get wet again, and I gave her the cast, and she scalloped, but she didn't scallop to it. She got into enough of the channel and went down and picked it up, and we were on 2s. It was the danger zone.
Right.
And I read it. And I remember I walked off the line, and Steve Eric was behind me. He goes, that was a good job, Chris. That was a good recall. You can imagine him saying it,
Yeah. I can say, nodding his head.
Nodding his head. That was a good recall. Like almost like he doesn't want you to hear it.
Yeah, exactly. With the deep voice
voice and all, man. But man, I have so much respect for Steve and his whole group of amateurs that have now become pros. Like he's been like a really influential person into my life, and he's just cool. Like, I don't have a better word for it. But
yeah,
Steve is just
I enjoy
cool.
running with Steve every time. I can remember, man, when I first got into it, I think he had Fly.
Yeah,
that's going way back.
Scratch.
No, this is before
Fly.
Scratch.
Oh yeah, Fly, then Scratch.
Yeah.
Then he has Fleet. That's why I got confused.
Yeah, Fly was the kind of the OG. She was like Snow White. She was a cat now. She's a real nice dog. And that was kind of when I first started. I remember watching her.
Things got some fly in them.
Yeah. Right. That explains a lot. So, yeah, Steve's always a pleasure to run with, him and Jeremy and that whole crew, Hoodoo crew. It's a good crew to run with.
Yeah. Cool. Well, you've had the privilege to stand behind or next to a lot of really good dogs. And you've made some comments that there's this particular dog that you feel like is like the most talented dog that you've stood besides.
Yeah.
But, go ahead. What are you going to say?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, in your mind, because I think everybody has a little bit different of what they classify as a really great dog. Mm-hmm. So what do you, when you say this dog is great, like what are the things that you feel make them great?
Decision making. Their ability to handle things under pressure, those type things. The dog you're talking about, little dog named Daisy that I'm running right now, Barry Lyons actually started her, and then her owner sent her to me to get her master title and run SRS. She's only 4. I mean, she finished 7th in the Crown last year. Really should have made the 6, but it's just one of those situations that didn't work out. Should have made it as a 3-year-old to the final of the Crown. And there's a lot of things that stand out about her to her. There is no perfect dog, and she's not perfect. She has her flaws. She's She can get a little wound up at the line. She gets a little antsy. She was antsy today.
Yeah, she was doing the little
She
dance.
can be her own worst enemy at times. But as far as marking ability and her ability to process things, she's probably the best I ever stood beside. Now she's a little bitty thing, but she marks extremely well. She processes things very well. She's typically a really good team player on blinds. Really good at running poison birds. The way the game is now with SRS, the dogs are all so good. I mean, they're just really, really good. I've been blessed to stand by dogs like Stroker and Roscoe, who both won crowns. Trigger, who didn't win a crown, but man, if I knew then what I know now, he probably could have. A dog named Man. Countless others I can't really count. But I would have to say overall, I would say Daisy's probably the best one I've ever stood beside. And she's only 4. She's got a lot of room to grow. There were things that made Stroker special. His calm demeanor. I never had to worry about if I was going to be able to get him to see a bird because he wasn't going to be bouncing around. Now, if he was bouncing around, you better watch out because when he was cocky, that's when he was dangerous because that's when he was really good. But he was never completely out of control to where I couldn't get him to see what I needed him to see. And he was intelligent. He was more intelligent than I would say. He was a great marking dog, but I'd say his intelligence helped him more than anything. He very rarely got himself in situations that you couldn't get out of. That's what made him so special. Roscoe, man, he was just a cool dog. He was I wouldn't say he was the greatest marker or the greatest blind runner or the greatest of anything that I've had, but he was just really good at all of them. And once he realized how to control his emotions, when he won that crown, is kind of when that was an accumulation of everything. Really came down to one bird nobody could get, but Roscoe got in the semifinals. Nobody else could get it. He got it, and it separated him so far from the pack that nobody else could catch him. But his biggest issue was working through those emotions, kind of like Daisy. But I'd say Daisy's more talented than what Roscoe was. But it's just the little things. You have to really pay attention to every little thing the dogs do. And I'd have to say, so far in my career, that may be the best one I've stood beside. And she hasn't accomplished near the things they have yet, but it's just a matter of time, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's cool to know that you got one that you feel like is really solid.
Yeah. And I feel like, I've got another one named Toombs with me that, man, he's the real deal. But for whatever reason, gosh dang, he's got the worst freaking luck. I mean, if it can go wrong, it goes wrong to that dog. Like last weekend at the SRS we ran in the semifinals, he was in great shape. And they threw a triple. You had to know off of it, run a blind, come back, and get the marks. And there was a check down bird. He goes in there and just bam, pops a check down bird. Well, when they threw the left bird, it hit a decoy, and we saw it shake. So I knew exactly where it was. And Toombs goes in there, puts his head down next to the decoy, roots around for a minute, runs out, comes back to the decoy, and you can see the decoy shaking.
It was stuck to the decoy?
The head of the ATB went through the legs of the silhouette, and he couldn't get the bird out.
What do they do in that situation?
So I had to call him in, and the judges walked out there and were like, look, the ATB's head was between the legs of the silhouette. He couldn't get the bird. Like, he was pulling at it, shaking the thing. So I had to come back and rerun, and they were only going to judge me on the 2 birds I'd not picked up. Well, Toombs is the type of dog, when things go wrong, like in his mind, when I recalled him, he got in trouble. And when I sent him back in there, he didn't want to go back in there because he thought he got in trouble.
And it's an old fall.
Yeah. And then the long field trial mark, he just goes out there and puts his nose on. So that was the difference in him making the finals. And that kind of stuff has just happened over and over again. I'm like, gosh, dang, when is this dog going to catch a break?
It seems to me like there's dogs that, I mean, I was standing talking to Lyle for like 5 seconds, and he said that one of these new dogs that he's got is a gamer. I think is the word he used. Like, he doesn't train well, but that dog comes out and just smacks everything.
Yeah, it happens like that sometimes. I've had dogs in the past building into SRSs. man, there's no way we make it out of the first series. And that joker ends up winning.
Yeah.
And there are some that way. Trigger was kind of that way. And Stroker was that way sometimes. Like before the crown he won, man, building up to it, I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. Because he just wasn't running that good. And then for whatever reason, when that first series hit and he was sitting in first place after the first series, I was like, this game's over. Because if you watched his career, he always started really slow. And then he'd work his way back and he'd get into the mix. But he was always like in 15th or something after the first series. When he got leading it after the first series, I was like, this is somewhere we've never been before. We can play with this. And once he got ahead, he didn't make bad decisions. And he wasn't the type of dog that was going to be defiant. So there's no way in hell that unless he just blew up, which was not something he did, that they were going to be able to catch me. You gave me 30 points with that dog, the game was over at all times because he's never going to get out of control enough to where you could catch that again. Daisy's a little different. She's wired a little hotter. That explosion could happen.
Yeah.
And it kind of did the other weekend. She missed a mark and then she slipped 2 whistles on a running water blind. That cost her 14 points. Well, she's a fire-breathing dragon. She runs quick. So in running water, it's kind of hard for her to hear whistles sometimes. But, yeah, just difference in the dogs.
Well, if you could be a superhero, what kind of superhero would you be?
I don't know.
You can't.
I don't want to be a superhero.
Everybody wants to be a superhero. Come on, dude. Okay, fine. Not a superhero, but have superhero abilities. What ability would you like?
I want to see the future.
You want to see the future?
I want to see the future. That way I can know if I should go this weekend or not.
You should go to that hunt test or not.
I can stay home.
Yeah, that's pretty good. All right.
Should I go to this SRS this weekend? Hang on.
You need
nope,
like,
I'm going to stay home this weekend.
What is it, those magic 8 balls?
Yeah.
Should I go to this SRS? Yes. And then you go and you get your teeth kicked in. You're like, frickin'.
I ain't ever listen to that thing again.
Yeah. Okay. Since food is such an important thing and, you know, as we go to events and stuff, what is your favorite breakfast food that the hobo could try to make next time?
Favorite breakfast food? Man, I like a good egg sandwich.
An egg sandwich, really?
Hell yeah.
Why don't we just go to Casey's and get a good egg sandwich?
No, that's not a good egg sandwich. No.
Okay, what makes a good egg sandwich?
Man, you got to have just the right amount of salt and pepper.
So not as much pepper as we put on the ribs today.
No. Little cheese, and it's got to be runny when you bite into it.
Okay, over easy egg.
Over easy egg with salt,
cheese,
pepper, and cheese.
That's pretty simple. You want it on a biscuit, a croissant? Like, what do you like?
No, just some toasted bread, man.
Toasted bread.
Buttered toasted bread.
All right, so we talked about this a little bit. You know, I asked the question, like, what are some things that amateurs or young pros, you know, kind of really need to know as they start their new adventure with their dog or whatnot?
Welcome to your new addiction. That would be the first thing. Realize that you're never going to stop learning. And we talked about this in the first podcast. You know, this is a never-ending learning journey. As far as amateurs are concerned that are just getting into it, be willing to go outside of your norm and seek help. More people are willing to help than what you think. If you see a certain person, pro, that you respect at a hunt test, don't be afraid to go up to them and talk to them. Ask maybe if you can throw birds for them. I promise you they're going to be like, yeah, absolutely. Come throw some birds. I'll help you out. So be willing to do that. For younger people that are looking to get into this as a profession, couple things you really need to know about it. If this is truly what you want to do and you want to be successful at it, you're going to have to 100% dedicate yourself to this craft, and that's what it is. There's going to be a lot of times that as you go on that you're going to be working when all your buddies are out partying or relaxing or having a good time. Like today, I mentioned to you, it's Memorial Day weekend. I'm running 15 dogs and a master test. Y'all are laid up at my house watching racing and cooking. You know, what kind of craziness is that? But that's going to be your life. And realize that there's going to be a lot of sacrifices you have to make between family, friends, if you want to be one of the best that does it. Always be open to learn. Don't ever close doors to people that you could learn from. Just trying to think some other things.
Well, I'll jump in with something that's helped me a lot is, you said ask questions, right? Ask a lot of questions. I think the question that helped me a lot in understanding how to be a better dog trainer was, why are you saying what you're saying? What is that impact, and what is the dog thinking that you're trying to do? Like, I think somebody said, like, Lyle thinks like dog. Mm-hmm. Like that's really, I think, key, is that you figure out the way that you can ask the right questions so that you understand the why behind what they're trying to help you but like maybe the correction that they're trying to help you understand the timing of. Why do you do it at this point?
Right.
What's the dog thinking? Because so often I think that there's this transition that you go from being a robot dog trainer to a dog trainer that, has a little bit of scientific understanding, and then you get to the art and science of when you're balancing those two things. Right. And that transition from just being a robot, in my opinion, comes down to understanding what questions to ask and how to get to the bottom of what they're trying to say.
Right. Understanding why they're doing what they're doing, both the trainer and the dog. The other part is understanding why birds are placed where they are.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Why does a dog not want to go there? Why are we throwing it there? Okay, because a dog doesn't want to go there. That's what the answer is going to be. Well, why does it not want to go there? That's what you need to know.
Yeah.
Because if you understand why it doesn't want to go there, then you can start looking at other things and say, well, that's similar to the other one. So that's things you need to understand.
And that's what I think I really enjoy about the Hunt Test Guides team or membership side of things, where we can see the setup that you and Lyle are doing. Because what I like about it is, I can see the setup, right? That's helpful. But hearing you describe what you're looking for and you saying this is what the dog's natural tendency is, I think is really helpful.
Right.
Because it to me it speeds up my understanding. Like we were talking about a mark that I set up for winter that you threw for me yesterday. Mm-hmm. And you're like, if you move that thing, it was like 40 yards to the right and threw it the other way, it would have been much harder because of these. I don't think we can even begin to explain the complexity of it on this podcast. It would have been
very complex without seeing it.
But the point is that you can move a bird 40 yards and throw it the other way, and it becomes completely different.
Oh, absolutely.
And that what I believe is like really fun and really hard to learn.
It's extremely hard to learn. And you made the comment just a minute ago about you go from, as you progress on through your learning journey of making a robot, to the psychological side of it. And what you'll realize, especially if you run some field trials, the dog that's a robot that sees situations and this is where I go, the really good judges know that.
Yeah.
And they're going to put birds to where the dog that is comfortable going to where the bird fell will get there. But the one that's a robot and says, I see this situation, this is what I do, will not even come close to getting the bird.
Yeah. And for anybody that thinks they want to go out there and run derbies, they're doing it in derbies.
Yes.
Like I'll never forget the first derby I ran, and it was like a channel mark, but the dogs went down into this valley before they saw the channel, and the channel led you not to the bird. And I watched dog after dog after dog be a good dog, get in that channel and just swim to the end of it, come up and be like, why is the white coat over on the left? It should be over here on the right.
Right. That's a good judge. Yeah. I mean, you can't fault the dogs for doing what they were trained to do.
Yeah.
But that was good bird placement on the judge's part, because they're trying to find the dogs that truly mark the best. And this is a misconception. Like, even in the open, let's just say they throw a triple and they have 2 retired on it. And the big retired bird is kind of skinny on a piece of water. All right. It's a skinny, like cut the corner at the end of it or something. Just it's a skinnier entry. Well, the dog that goes fat and takes more water and has a big hunt and gets that bird is not going to beat the dog that cheats the water and goes up there and pins the mark. Because the emphasis is on marking. Which dog marked the bird better?
Yeah.
The one that cheated that piece of water and went up there and stabbed it. Now, the one that took more water and had a big hunt, yeah, it did more of the trained response, but did it mark the bird better? So a lot of the times, more times than not, that dog that cheated the water went up there and stuck that bird's going to win. And that's kind of counteractive to what we're worked so hard to do.
Yeah. And I also think, though, that we like to talk about this field trial stuff because it's challenging and it's what's challenging us right now. But I think in the hunt test game, when in doubt, train the trained response.
Right.
And I think we should be clear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a difference. In a field trial game, there's so much distance for that decision making to be made.
Yeah, we talked about this, I think, in episode 1.
Yeah, and so in the hunt test game, it's very short distance. There's a lot of processing that has to go on. So we really have to err on the side of making sure the dogs are doing the correct response to pictures. But still, even in the hunt test game, starting to see it more. Judges really understand, okay, the trained dog's going to go there. But are they really marking the bird? I'm going to throw it a little bit over here. And it may have it situated to where the trained response will get you semi-close.
Yeah.
But then you'll have to make a decision to go to the bird or somewhere else. And they'll have something that influences them to go the wrong way.
Yeah. Well, it's getting late, man. I think it might be time to call this one quits.
We're going to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was pretty solid. I do want to make sure that we talk about all the great things that you and I and the team at the Hunt Test Guide are doing. So if you all are listening to this, I encourage you guys to go over there to the hunttestguide.com, check out the courses and the team membership where you can see all the setups that Clark and Lyle are doing on a weekly basis. I think it would really help a lot of amateurs out there and a lot of young pros that we talked about. So
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody. And if it's nighttime, have a good night. If it's morning, have a good morning.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.